I don't really have that much of a history with Fire Emblem, but I do know that Awakening is the game that I played the most on my 3DS. I haven't finished it, mostly because I'm very busy, and I spent most of my time in that game grinding and leveling up characters, and support conversations, and playing the shipper on deck. The sequel, Fire Emblem Fates, not only got into a lot of hoopla for censorship and localization issues that I talk about many times in the past, some fans were also a bit disappointed by it. And now we have the sequel, Fire Emblem Three Houses. This is actually one of my most anticipated game of this year, because I do like myself some Fire Emblem, and this is a standalone game that doesn't necessitate the completion or even knowing anything of the previous games. And since this is my most anticipated game of the year, I chose to avoid pretty much any promotional image, trailers, or any information about this game. So I went into the game knowing absolutely nothing about it. And what do I think of it? Welcome to Appabend's Uncapped, a series of reviews by yours truly. Today's review is gonna be on Fire Emblem Three Houses, a tactical JRPG game developed by Intelligent Systems and Koei Tecmo, and published by Nintendo. But before we start off this review, YouTube will demonetize this video because it's a game full of husbandos and waifus, and saying the word die is not advertiser friendly, so thank you all for sponsoring this channel. You can do so by checking the links down below. Also, another warning, there will be some light spoilers, nothing major, just enough for you to still be able to enjoy the review and the game. Hopefully. So Fire Emblem Three Houses have nothing to do with the previous games. It has a standalone story taking place in a fictional land called Fodlan. You play as Bailiff? Anyway, you play as a mercenary who managed to save the leader of the three houses of the monastery from a bunch of bandits. You were later appointed by the Archbishop Lady Rhea to become a new professor of one of the aforementioned three houses to fight against an upcoming evil. Can the professor become the savior of the land, or will she be the conqueror and turn into the dark side? The best way to describe Fire Emblem Three Houses in a nutshell is that it's a really bizarre mix of Fire Emblem, Persona, and Harry Potter. Yes, I know the Harry Potter comparisons are getting staler and more rampant, but at least they're not calling it the Dark Souls of tactical JRPG or something. Except instead of playing as a student, you're playing as a professor, teaching students of whatever houses you want to pick, like a Defense of the Dark Arts teacher that didn't get replaced every year. This game is quite different from a lot of games that I've played in my life, actually. This is such a unique specimen of a game, with mechanics that are unlike any other games of its kind. While it is somewhat comparable to Persona and the previous Fire Emblem games, it managed to create an identity of its own. This is a game so unique that its distinctive quality alone is enough for me to recommend it, especially to those who have never played a Fire Emblem game before. The game is split between two different sections: the high school Persona section, except you're the professor instead of the student, and the battle section, in which you play a typical Fire Emblem game, as in a tactical turn-based combat game. The high school section is where you give lectures to your students during the school days and do many kinds of activities at the end of the week, like bonding with your teammates, participating in many extracurricular activities, and because it's a JRPG in 2019, of course it has a fishing minigame. To put it simply, the high school bit is where you micromanage your units and resources so that you can be better at fighting people. Now technically, it's nothing new. There are many other tactical games out there that let you to micromanage your units and resources, but not in a way Three Houses frame it. The game frames all the micromanagement stuff in a high school setting where you are the professor micromanaging your students. In a typical tactical game, you are usually the commander and you are micromanaging your soldiers and training them or whatever. It's such a unique framing device that managed to distinct Three Houses from a lot of games out there. That is, until you play the game halfway through, and without spoiling too much, it basically turns into a normal Fire Emblem game again. I appreciate that Three Houses is still being Fire Emblem in the end, but I do feel like there's a proof of concept in the game that, in my opinion, is worth expanding in other games. The only thing that's missing is the who's the best house competition, like in the PS1 Harry Potter game. But putting the game's uniqueness aside, let's talk about the actual turn-based combat, which is largely unchanged from the previous Fire Emblem games. games. You're put in a grid-like arena and you control your units one by one to do whatever attacks that you want to do to whatever enemies that you want to destroy. It's a typical turn-based tactical game, and since I'm not too much of a fan of the series, I can't exactly say if the overall mechanics are faithful to the series. They kind of remove the sword versus lance versus axe system, and I say kind of because you can absolutely destroy axe-wielding heroes with sword characters who have certain abilities. I can, however, say that it is quite challenging and fun to play. A brand new feature of the game, or at least a feature that wasn't in Awakening as far as I know, is basically the Divine Pulse mechanic, which is best described as the Undo button. You have 3 Undos at the start, and you can expand them more and more. Failing that, you can just hold L, R, plus, and minus, and soft reboot the entire game to go back to the main menu and restart all over again because the game doesn't have a load feature in-game. But the gameplay isn't perfect though. Don't you just love the lost item fetch quests? You know, where you find lost items and you return those items to the owner for some extra support points, but the game doesn't tell you who the owner is and just gives certain clues for it. I looked up for a guide to solve these lost items, and I will admit that with absolutely zero shame because this quest is a load of nonsense, especially considering that the items being returned are some of the most worthless junk that you can think of. It's even better when the owner of that lost item is literally right next to you. Here's your lost blue stone, Ignatz, one that I just took from the floor of this very same room that you're standing in. You know what else that you're gonna need a guide on? The freaking team minigames. Do you know how there was a lot of controversy surrounding Fates and the petting minigame? Well, intelligent systems don't want to get into that waifu simulator hoopla again and just make it very safe for work. The team minigame is basically in every aspect the petting minigame from Fates, except a hell of a lot more annoying because you have to make 3 guesses on which topic that the respective character would like. 2 if you have their favorite tea. Now, how can you figure the topics out? Look for a freaking guide, because even if you know what the character's personality is, the options are so vague that they don't really convey anything. I know that Claude is a militant freaking atheist, but if I discuss about, say, cute monks, is that an endorsement for the religion or just me saying that the monks are cute? I mean, I've seen atheists want to date cute monks before, but putting all of my complaints aside, the gameplay is mostly good. It isn't the best in the business, but it's good enough to keep you guys entertained, and bonus points for framing the tactical micromanagement in a unique setting that I don't think any other modern games have managed to capture, or at least for the first half of the game. Now let's talk about another important meat of the conversation, and that is the story and the characters. Let's talk about the protagonist first, because in my opinion, this is the one element where I feel like the series downgraded. Now, I absolutely love Robin as a protagonist. While she is an avatar of your creation, she talks just like any other character in the game. Or he. I always prefer a female Robin. Okay, from now on, I will refer to the avatars in a female pronoun because I like women. Anyway, when the game prompts me to name my character to whoever I want, I began to worry because custom names mean that the character won't be mentioned by name by any other character, and I feel like not mentioning my character by name is just not intimate enough. Bailiff, yes, that's how I'm gonna say it, deal with it, is essentially a persona protagonist. When I say persona protagonist, I mean silent protagonists that don't really speak and merely becomes a projection of you. You all know how much I love Persona, but the one element that I always don't like was the silent protagonist, because they're just mere projections of you rather than an actual character in the game. So it's a bit too much to take when you romance certain characters and they fell in love with the silent protagonist that doesn't speak much. I can buy that in the previous game because Robin actually talks, but not in here because the professor doesn't really talk. That being said, when the professor does actually smile, she is definitely bailiff material. Okay, I'll shut up now. The support conversations are back, and unlike the previous Fire Emblem games, they are fully voiced and still absolutely fantastic. They are great ways for you to learn more about the characters and seeing hidden depths beyond their very simple characteristics. The support conversations range from really silly banter to really deep discussions about faith and religion, and the more you get these support conversations, the more you understand these characters. Unlike Awakening, you can't be a shipper on deck and ship characters other than your own. Kind of. We'll get to that in a minute. Byleth can still pick her romance, but she's not a shipper on deck, and even then, she wouldn't get the S-rank romance until the very end of the game. What's weird about the support conversations is that some of them have additional steps, which is bizarre, and some support conversations are poorly timed. I got Sedef and Flane's level C support conversation, and they talk about a kidnapping that happened 5 years ago, treating it as if it happened just now. So, yeah, that's awkward. Now, the previous Fire Emblem games got a lot of flack for trying to be a waifu simulator of some sort, or waifu emblem as people call it. While there are still elements of war and politics, thanks to Awakening finding great luck in the weebs demographic, they decided to milk that one into oblivion with more fan service in the next game, and that got a lot of mixed reactions from the fans. Thankfully for the die-hard Fire Emblem fans out there, Three Houses goes back to its roots. There are still some really good waifus and husbandos, but they're not as fan service heavy as last time, which is perfectly fine for me as long as the game focuses on the main story that involves wars, political intrigues, and perhaps some of the most emotional battles that I have ever been through in any video game. This game is structured in a very diabolical manner. It starts off with the quirky high school setting where you just talk to your students and other students as well. It's a peaceful little time where you can have fun and dance around and stuff. But as time goes on, well, without spoiling too much, there are tons of bloods being shed. And it's really not pretty. The game lures you into this strange sense of comfort and having you to interact and bond with these people, only to see them die one by one as the game progresses. It's kind of like being stuck in an anime version of Game of Thrones. It's quite rare for me to feel guilty on killing someone in a video game, but the last half of this game nearly broke me. There's never been a time in any video game that I play where I chant something along the lines of, "Man, I really like you. You're a good guy. Don't make me do this." And unfortunately, there are times where you have to do it. That is, unless you manage to recruit everybody to your house. It is possible to do so. You'd have a lot less bloodbath in the end, but there's not much change other than that. It will be a less emotional experience, and good luck micromanaging that many people. That, and you'd leave the other two houses pretty much empty, and I legitimately feel guilty for that. As for the actual story itself, it's fine. It's nothing particularly amazing, but the strength of Fire Emblem is having excellent and well-written characters involved in the story. But the story is nothing to be excited about, despite having tons and tons of bloodshed. It's a typical fantasy JRPG story centered on the three houses, including their peaceful times and their not so peaceful times, but nothing much beyond that. And remember when I say that you cannot be a shipper on deck? Well, you can't because the game does the shipping for you. In every ending of the game, the characters will have their conclusions and epilogues, which I'm censoring the details here because of spoilers, and some of the conclusions actually lead up into two characters being together. How do you get them? I have no flipping idea because I maxed everybody's support conversation, so the game just picks up randomly. Going to the wiki page of the characters, I'm actually seeing possible endings for two characters to be together. Ignatz and Marianne are my preferred pairing, and there's an ending for both of them, but I didn't get it. What I did get is an ending with Ignatz and Raphael. No, not with him, but with his sister, which actually isn't that bad to be fair, but I got an ending where Lorenz ended up with Lasifia instead of my preferred pick Leonie, who in my ending ended up with Sedef. As for Marianne, she ended up with Hilda and being best friends together or something. As somebody who loves to ship characters, I feel absolutely betrayed by this revelation. Let me have control of my own endings, game, or I'll spoil myself in the wikia. And my last but certainly not least complaint about this game's story, well, I won't spoil it, but the game jumped some serious shark in the second half that made me laugh my ass off. The game reveals some technological leaps that are about as believable as Kenshin Himura having the Dominator gun, killing his enemies by calling on drone strikes while piloting a giant mech. Sounds freaking awesome, but just a bit out of place. Like that dubstep track. Also, the game is very poorly optimized, runs perfectly fine when docked for the most part, but drops to an unbearable 15 FPS on portable mode. I don't know if the game has an option to run on classic Fire Emblem mode, as in with the pixel arts to save the battery and give performance. Despite the game being on portable console hybrid, I actually do not recommend playing this game on portable mode. It is playable if the frame rate doesn't drop, which is unfortunately a lot of times in portable mode, but the experience is not as great as docked, especially with the really small text. Like seriously, someone needs to bump up the text size for this game in portable mode. I can't see anything. Overall, Fire Emblem Three Houses is a rare specimen of a video game. It's a game so unique on its mechanics and so unusual in its implementation that it's worth recommending merely on the fact that I've never played anything quite like it. Oh sure, the turn-based tactical combat is nothing new. Sure, the story wasn't particularly groundbreaking. Sure, the school elements and the protagonist are straight up Persona, but it was the homeroom teacher simulator mechanic that truly won the game for me and make it stand out amongst the rest of the tactical JRPGs of the modern age. That and the characters are really solid, well written, and to see them being utterly wrecked in the second half of the game is an emotional journey that I think anyone should experience at least once. For $60, this game would net you hundreds and hundreds of hours, and I cannot recommend it enough. For Fire Emblem fans, the game still has that anime aesthetic, but it's not the main focus. It's less weeb fanservice stuff and more fantasy JRPG, which is what Fire Emblem is all about, and you will be very pleased with it. For newcomers, this is an excellent entry in the series that absolutely doesn't require you to know any of the previous games, and for those who are planning to buy a Nintendo Switch, if you are offered one free game, I would instantly pick this one over any other game.